rock and roll promoter, and my career started in, let's say, 1962 in the Bay Area, San Francisco. I'm from Seattle, Washington, and I started learning an awful lot about music through the coffee houses when I was growing up, the folk music, and then I hung out in some of the clubs where there was blues music being played, a lot of blues, and it was really an opener for me. And then the rock and roll was just really kind of getting started, as far as, you know, the whole thing of Chuck Berry really came from I think the whole black part of music had an awful lot to do with influencing young white people, particularly musicians, and also people who appreciated music. They were able to grasp and create music, and so there was a lot of really good early rock and roll music that was established here in the United States. And then obviously we go back now, we're 50 years back with the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and the British invasion, where there was a great deal of music that came from England, and they also picked up on the blues. I produced and promoted rock and roll events, and I really was self-taught. I learned kind of through osmosis from my mentor Bill Graham in San Francisco. He had the Fillmore West, and then Chet Helms, who had the Avalon Ballroom, and the Family Dog, and some other people that were promoting music, and I picked up on it real quick. So I kind of taught myself in a way that you had to deal with managers of rock and roll bands, agents who sold the dates to the promoter. I became the promoter. Then you dealt with radio stations as far as buying the advertising and promoting the event, the concert, the music of that day, the 60s. And there were certain stations that played the music, and then as a promoter, producer, you would pick the music. Like if the Doors had the Light My Fire on the radio and it was a top 10 single, then you definitely jumped on that, got a hold of the manager, the agent, whoever you get a hold of, the record company, and you got a date. So you'd had a date locked in. Oftentimes I do 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 dates, and I do Oregon, Washington, Western Canada, and I would also present shows in colleges, whether let's say up in Bellingham at the college there, or Corvallis in Oregon. Put this on, so promoters have to wear different hats. So in being an entrepreneur, you somewhat have to be aware and connect with people. In other words, you got to be smart enough and friendly enough to connect with people. So I connected with managers and agents and record executives and other promoters. There was a lot of really wonderful promoters. We all kind of grew up at the same time with this early rock and roll. And then obviously when the Cream came, that would have been kind of the start of the British invasion, where there was a lot of bands in England that came over, and I got the good fortune to work with every one of them. I could squeeze in 1,500. I'd have a balcony in the ballroom, so this was like a ballroom. The Eagles was an organization, a club, a private club, members, a certain kind of cult or sect or something. But regardless of that, all the bands that I presented there were bands like Jefferson Airplane, Eric Bird and the Animals, B.B. King. Many artists came and played the ballroom, and then all the local bands. I had the local bands open for the well-known bands, and so I was able to establish a rapport with a lot of local bands. And then the Eagles really did well. It was very, very good to me. There were times when it was very difficult and hard, and as far as keeping it all going, because you know, it costs a lot of money to have the proper sound and the proper lights and the proper equipment, and getting people back and forth from airports and doing various things. So then what happened was I got the idea to do what's called a Seattle Pops Festival. I had gone to Monterey Pop, so I got an idea of what it was like, where 25,000 people were down in Monterey, California, when Jimi Hendrix lit his guitar on fire. Pop Festival took place in Woodinville in 1969, and I had billboards on all the buses in town, and I had airplanes flying around with banners promoting it, and also Seattle's, it was during the period of time when they have Seafair in August, so you're guaranteed there's no rain. It's a 1 month you're guaranteed. There's an X amount of days where there's no rain. I even bought rain insurance because I was expecting a crowd of 25,000 people. Well, I had 30,000 people the first day, which was a Friday. Then on Saturday I had 60,000 people, and then the third day 90,000 people. It felt like there was a couple 100,000 people there. A lot of people were really having a great time. I spent a great deal of money putting this event on, and nobody got hurt. There wasn't one person that got hurt. Everybody was very, very peaceful. There was a lot of people getting high, obviously. And there was all kinds of wonderful psychedelic drugs available in 1969, and I certainly didn't poo-poo them, and no, not anybody I knew that poo-pooed them. But the cool thing was we just smoked our doobies and had a great time. It's almost like a dream type quality. In a sense, it was like being in an asylum, a rock and roll asylum, and we were all the inmates, and people really couldn't do too much about it. Tina, the review, and them being on stage, and Chuck Berry being on stage, and Jim Morrison falling off the stage because he was a little high, fell out into the crowd of the Doors, and then many other bands were there. Chicago, Led Zeppelin. In fact, I think I flew Jimi Hendrix in a helicopter. The helicopter came right down backstage. I spent around, I think, close to $60,000 putting the event on, and there was a lot of cash flying around. Some people made off with some money, which is, you live and learn when you're a punk-ass rock and roll promoter. In 2003, I dealt with pretty extreme cancer, sarcoma in the neck, and after the biopsy, when I went in to see Michael DeBay and his other associate, his other doctor, they dealt with head and nose and throat and cancer, I was given 3 to 6 months to live. And that's something when all of a sudden that registers in your head. So I immediately said, well, what do I do? And they said, well, get to Les Piddle, to your primary doctor, and start your radiation and start your chemotherapy. And I did that week. I didn't even wait. I don't even think I waited a day. I think I just went directly to Les's office and gave him the bad news, and a few other people the bad news. And then you just deal with it, and I totally dealt with it. I immediately went out and bought every vitamin I could buy. Well, it turns out that's the one thing you don't want to do. The nurses do not want you to take any vitamins because they want to give you the total dose of your radiation and your chemotherapy. I lost my hair and got down to 99 pounds, and all I can say is I'm a survivor, and I'm very proud of the people that helped me in Seattle, the cancer, or everybody who works with cancer, including the University of Washington Medical School. The thing that I'm still alive, and I just feel so good about the fact that I was able to make it through. And I had to work at it. It wasn't like I just couldn't lie there and feel sorry for myself. And I had some good people with me all along this episode, this experience of dealing with cancer. So I have a phrase, I'm still alive. Well, I feel real good about being alive, so in my website, in Grafmyre.com, it says I'm still alive, and on my business card, and then I'll be using it probably even in my film. They're going to be making a movie about me in the near future, a story that takes place about rock and roll music from 1963 to 1971.